5 p.m. I'm going to start. Hi everyone, Assalamualaikum and good afternoon. So glad to have all of you with us today. I'm Dr. Nadiah Husseini Zainol Abidin, the co-technical chair of the second IEEE 5-minute final year project competition 2021, and I will be your moderator for today's session. So I've received a lot of questions regarding the submission link. We will talk about that later on in the WhatsApp group, so don't worry about that. So the session today is called How to Write a Killer Speech, and it will be delivered by Dr. Ashwin Charles. Dr. Ashwin Charles is a public speaker, debater, and also a trainer. His notable accomplishments include winning the 2017 3-minute thesis Asia Pacific competition and People's Choice Award, as well as being the first runner-up in the 2017 Falling Walls Lab in Berlin. Today, let's hear his thoughts on how to write a killer speech. Over to you, Dr. Ashwin.
Thank you. Thank you to the host. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
All right. Let me share my screen. Hi. So nice to meet all of you. First, I'd like to thank IEEE Young Engineers for giving me this opportunity, and I feel honored that they would think of me to deliver this speech. This would have been great if we could read face to face, you know. I think we all would have benefited more. I love the banter and, you know, being able to speak to the audience and have feedback and, you know. But unfortunately, because of this COVID situation, we're kind of forced into this online meeting, but we'll make the best of it. I think we'll do okay. So my style of presentation is I prefer if you guys participate. So if you have questions, you can just unmute your mic and ask, no problems here. Or if you're shy to do that, that's fine. You can just type your question in the chat, and I'd be happy to answer them. So before we start, probably I should introduce myself a bit more, right? So my name is Dr. Ashwin. I'm a lecturer from University of Malaysia, Pahang. Hold on, we have a question. Right. Okay. So I'm a lecturer from University of Malaysia, Pahang, from the Chemical Engineering Department. But long before I became a lecturer, I was the avid enthusiast of debates and public speaking. And as a result of that, I have been a trainer for quite a long time. I've been around the block. I've trained all levels of students, from primary school, to secondary school, to university students, to undergraduates. And some of my notable accomplishments include, hold on. Sorry about that. It's a bit of a technical issue going on my end. Okay. So some of my accomplishments include I was the winner of the 3MT Asia Pacific competition. So this was a competition held in Australia for the Asia Pacific region. And in 2017, I won this. It was the first time a Malaysian had ever won this competition. So it was kind of a big deal at the time. But just the year after that, one of your committee members, your very own Dr. Mustapha Kamil, she won this competition as well. So she won the national level first, and then UPM contacted me and they wanted me to work together with her. So Dr. Yasmin is actually going to be in the workshop coaching session. So look out for her. She's a very dangerous individual. She was an excellent speaker before I got to her, but then together we polished her script a little bit. And she went on to also win the same competition and achieve exactly the same thing as I did. She got the People's Choice Award and the overall winner as well. So it was a pretty cool thing, to have Malaysians win back-to-back 2 years. But fortunately for me, the year that I joined, for winning this competition, we also got a chance to participate in another leg of the competition, which was the Falling Walls Lab. So the Falling Walls Lab, I managed to get the first runner-up. It's a very similar format of competition. 3 minutes, you present your thesis, but it's a bit more complicated. There are props involved. There's moving slides. There's question and answer. So this one, I managed to get the first runner-up. Again, what's interesting to note here is that you have 2 Malaysians actually. So I got first runner-up, and second runner-up was this Sri Lahari Namani. She's from Ames University in Kedah. She's an Indian national, but she was studying in the local university. It's pretty cool that we are making a splash in the international community. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is, number one, I have some insights into how to write a good script, and that's what I want to share with you today. And number two, don't sell yourself short because you're Malaysian. I've been around the whole debate public speaking circle a little bit, and Malaysians have been making a splash in the international community. So don't think, oh, we're Malaysian, our English not good, we shouldn't join this kind of thing. No. That's not true. That's not true at all. Okay. So we're good at this. We're good at communicating. We're good at communicating research work in a way that people understand and people care. Right? So, okay, enough about me. Let's talk about you. So the first question you need to ask yourself in this kind of a competition is, what are you doing? Right? What are you doing in this competition? And in order to really answer this question, first thing that you've got to do is you've got to understand, what is this competition about, right? What is this competition about? What's the spirit of this competition? And I would say that, loosely speaking, the spirit of this competition is about communicating research in a simple manner to a non-expert audience. That's what you're learning how to do, and that's what this competition is encouraging you to do. And there's a reason why we need to do that. The way technology has progressed has made it such that we have reached a point where, in order for you to understand or do something or manufacture something, you need to know so much detail that at the end of your research, only a handful of people understand really what that research is about. There are only a handful of people maybe in the world who know what you're talking about. And we need to broaden that. We need to disseminate that information better so that more people are involved and we're all on the same page and we can work towards solving problems better. Now, to hopefully make you understand the point I'm making a bit better, let me ask you a question. How many of you know who invented the first telephone? You can unmute your mic and answer, or you can type in the chat. Nice. Okay, so some of you are quick to get it. So yeah, that's right, Alexander Graham Bell. Okay, so how many of you know who invented the first television? Television, not so popular, I guess. The first wireless telegraph. No, not a lot of Philips, Edison, no. But good guesses. So usually, I guess I'm a bit of an invention nerd then. So usually it's easy to guess, right? These first inventions. So the first television, I think, was John Logie Baird, and the first wireless telegraph, I think, was Guglielmo Marconi. But it's common. It's usually fairly common knowledge. It's usually fairly common knowledge, and it's easy to guess. But what if I instead asked you? What if I instead asked you who invented the first mobile phone? See, at least this one you have some John Baird. Yeah? Somebody got it. So at least before this, with the telephone, you get the answer pretty quickly. If I ask for the mobile phone, suddenly it's a lot harder to answer, right? Oh, that's fast. Martin Cooper. Okay, not bad, not bad. Yeah, that's actually correct. So, wow, are you Voon? Are you involved with telecommunications somehow? That's impressive. This was not common knowledge to me. So anyway, yeah, Martin Cooper, that's right. But he didn't invent it alone though, and that's the point I'm trying to make. So on the patent, there's not just one name, a bunch of names. He invented it together with his mentor at the time. I think his name was Mitchell, and there were a bunch of other engineers. And that's kind of the issue. And this was back in 1970. If I asked you who invented the LCD screen or the plasma screen TV or some more recent technology, you would have a really hard time answering it because it's a bunch of people. And the way technology has advanced is such that uh, it's no longer a work where one person did it. You know, there wasn't this thing before, and suddenly there is, and this person invented or conceptualized the whole idea by themselves. Right? It's not like that anymore. These days, the ideas technically already exist, and somebody incrementally adds to it to the point where it becomes something very new and very current. And it's very hard to pinpoint the point in history or the biggest contributors to this. And the reason for that is partly that we need to share this information. And so few people know what's actually going on in that field. Like if you, I mean, most of us are engineering students or engineers here, and we'd be hard pressed to create something like a handphone from scratch. We don't know how to do that. Only a handful of people know from start to finish what the process of creating a handphone is like. So the point I'm trying to get at is it's that technology has reached a point where what we understand is just a tiny piece of the whole picture. And that is why competitions like this, the 5 minute final year project, is designed to help people who understand what's going on share their knowledge and get more people on board so that more people understand what's going on and we can all contribute and help to solve problems that are coming up. So that's the spirit of the competition, right? So what does this mean for you? For you as a competitor, you can look at this competition as something like a elevator pitch challenge, but not quite. It's like an elevator pitch challenge, but not really. So, what's an elevator pitch challenge? You guys know, right? What's an elevator pitch challenge? Okay, I'll briefly explain. So, an elevator pitch challenge is where, for example, you have an idea, right? You have an idea for a product, or you have an idea for something that you want to do, a business plan or product, okay? And you want to pitch it to a big shot. Usually this big shot is a boss, your boss, or the CEO of the company, or an investor, or a bank, somebody who is going to take up your idea. But this person is a big shot, and he's busy, and it's hard to get this person's attention and time. So what a savvy or a scrappy person might do is they might tail this person to an elevator, follow him into the elevator, and then once the doors close and he's going up to his office or whatever, then you pitch him the idea, right? Because he's trapped. He's got nowhere to go. He can't leave, and you've got that time while he's in the elevator moving to his office in order to pitch your idea to him. He can't run away. He's got nothing else to do anyway, so he's in the mood to listen to your idea. And by the time you're finished, if you can convince him that your idea is good, maybe he wants to buy or purchase or invest in your idea. So the 5 minute FYP is similar to this. You're kind of pitching your idea. You're kind of pitching your 5 minute final year project, but not quite. Not quite. And the reason is because, yes, you are pitching your idea, but you really want to avoid trying to sell it or oversell it to your audience, because the people listening to this, they're not trying to buy your idea. They're not investing. They are not invested in any way except in their attention. That's what you're buying from them. That's what you want. You want them to invest their attention into your idea. So the tone of your presentation should be more like a conversation. This is how I like to um, explain it to the students that I train. The tone of how you present it should be closer to a conversation with a stranger at a bus stand. That's what you're doing, you know. So with this 5-minute final year project, what you're doing is you're having a conversation with a stranger at a bus stand. Imagine that the bus is coming in 5 minutes. Okay, the bus is very on time and on schedule. In 5 minutes, the bus will come. And for 5 minutes, you have this stranger who doesn't know you. You don't know the person doesn't know you. They don't know anything about your work. You don't know anything about their background. And you just, for the heck of it, you're just sharing with them what you do. How would you explain it to them? You know, that's the tone you're going for. So the tone should be more conversational. It should be like, hey, you realize that global warming has become such a huge problem. Is it crazy that the temperature of the earth is going up by fractions of a Celsius every year and nobody's doing anything about it? I think that's nuts, you know? So I decided to do something about it. Look, this is what I did. So that's what you're trying to go for, a more conversational approach. If you so a lot of students go for the reporter approach, you know. The reporter approach is like, you know, it's all statistics. They're more interested in being correct and accurate. So that's, I would say, not very effective, because your judges are, you know, they probably get a lot of that at their workplace already, you know, and they're joining this competition and they want to see something different. And if you're playing to win, if you're in it to win it, then you're trying to be different. So you should, I think a good tone to go for is something like this, conversational, right? Think of this competition as uh, trying to start up a conversation with a stranger at a bus stand. It's a difficult thing to do, by the way, to start up a conversation with a stranger and to talk about your final year project of all things. I mean, it's easier to talk about the weather than to talk about your final year project with a stranger at a bus stand, you know. So that's the challenge. That's the challenge of this competition. You've got to make your final year project interesting enough that a stranger would want to listen. So the important thing here, I think, is to get in the right headspace. So you want to make sure that when you're talking about what you're talking about, the way you are presenting it and the tone is correct. So things to avoid include, don't have a salesperson tone. So a lot of students, they are used to attending maybe conferences or exhibitions. And in these kind of situations, you have to defend your work, right? The people who are listening to you are experts in that field. And they're going to come at you and they're going to ask questions about this thing. So their tone is very defensive. They're defending the significance of their work. They're defending, their rationale for choice of this and choice of that. So this is not the same medium. This kind of competition don't need to do that, because the people, the audience who are listening to you, they're not experts in your field, and that's not what they want from you. They want you to wow them with your work. So they want things like, what's the problem statement? What's the significance? What is your work doing for humanity? Why is it important? Why is it great? So they're not interested in the technical details. They're not going to ask you and dissect your work. So you need to get the tone. You need to get the tone correct. And then, sorry, the other thing that you need to avoid is salesman tone. So the salesman tone is when you really treat this like an elevator pitch. So it's kind of an elevator pitch, but you don't want to have the salesperson tone. You don't want to be like, please buy my product. My product's great. My product's awesome. I'm selling it to you. Because the moment your tone becomes like an advertisement or marketing ploy, people become defensive. You don't want your judges to go like, oh, wait, hold on a second. That seems a bit unrealistic. You know, you're telling me that you single-handedly have solved the greenhouse gas problem, Earth's greenhouse gas problem. I'm not sure I buy that. You know, so if you are too pushy about what it is that you're doing and you make too large a claim about the benefits of what project are bringing to the table, or the scope of the problem that you're solving, then what you'll get from your judges is they'll be like, hold on a second, I'm not so sure I buy that. So again, the tone is important. A conversational tone where you're like, hey, look, I know this problem is here, and I spent some time thinking about it, and I think that this is a reasonable solution to the problem. And this is what I think, and I hope that further down the line, these are the outcomes of my project. and this is how my project can be useful or can contribute to society. So before we go further, probably a good place to start is to dispel some myths associated with this kind of presentation. So the first myth, some people, I don't think a lot of people think this, they think that people go up on stage, or in this case online, and they don't have anything prepared. They're just explaining their work off the cuff, just off the top of their head. Maybe they have some slides, some slide notes, and they're just looking at that and they're just talking. Because some people, the way they talk, it seems effortless. So it makes it easy to believe that. But I guarantee you, every single one of the people who win these types of competitions have practiced and polished and refined their speeches and have presented it many times in front of many different audiences. And that's how they got it to become like that, to seem effortless and to seem like, it's a conversation, to seem natural. It's difficult. It's difficult to do. It takes work, takes thinking. You got to plan, and you got to really consider what it is that you want to say and how you're going to say it. So no, people don't just wing it and then win the competition. That doesn't happen. Okay. I have some experience in this field, so take my word for it. Okay. So second myth, you need to explain your entire final year project. Not necessary. Okay. The title of this competition is 5-minute final year project. Your entire final year project, you took many months to do it, right? Easily 100 hours put into it. You read lots of papers, you did lab work, you did data analysis, all of that took time. So there's no way to condense all of that to 5 minutes. So you can't explain your entire final year project. You need to pick and choose which parts are important to keep. So we'll go into that a little bit more later on. Okay. Myth number 3, you have to be technically sound. Okay, what do I mean by this? Well, some people, when they're explaining things, they want to be very exact. They don't want to skip steps in the explanation. So A leads to B leads to C leads to D. They have to explain, they have to derive the equation, they have to, write the mathematical representation of what's going on, use the correct citations. This is what you would do if you were presenting in a conference and you had 20 minutes or 30 minutes or an hour. But in 5-minute final year project presentation, you cannot afford to do this. You cannot afford to be technically sound. Don't give citations. That's not going to impress anybody. This is not the correct audience for that. Okay. So more than the details and the technical soundness of your work, what the audience is interested in is the overarching idea and how the ideas are connected, right? And whether you can sell the narrative to them. The narrative is important. So you have to be careful with that lah. Some it has to be technically sound, but only so that it is logical. So if it's not logical, then you have a problem. But as long as it's logical, you don't need to explain the tiny little details. Okay. Myth number 4, you have to use up all the 5 minutes. So this is a common problem. Students participating in this kind of competition, what they do is they tend to want to use the time given. And so they plan their speech, and when they practice, it comes out very naturally and very fluidly. And then they finish 4:49 on the dot, right? 4 minutes, 59 seconds. 4 minutes, 59 seconds. But then the day of the competition come, the camera turn on, suddenly got technical problem, suddenly 5 seconds gone. And then when they finish speaking, is 5:04. Then I don't know how it is in this competition, but in the 3-minute thesis competition and Falling Wells lab competition that I joined before, if you exceed the time limit, what happens is a little trap door opens up underneath you and you fall into a moat and crocodiles eat you and you die. So you cannot exceed the time. So I'm guessing this competition is also like that. If they give you a time limit, you've got to stay within the time limit. So don't exceed the time limit. And how you don't exceed the time limit is you plan so that you have some buffer. Because what happens is when you're presenting, sometimes people get nervous. Some people, their response to getting nervous is they speak faster. That's quite normal, and that's okay. If you finish ahead of time, that's no problem. But some people, when they get nervous, they forget or they stumble. And then if that happens, then that will take up more time, and those little few seconds count. So leave some buffer. Don't use up all the 5 minutes. Okay. Point number 5, you have to use scientific jargon. So for example, if you're explaining your work, you shouldn't be like, oh, the phosphorus bioluminescent spires designed using nanobot micro spindling technique using electrospinning magnetic super resolution was used to don't if you say all that, then your audience straight away turn off already. They're not going to continue listening to you because you're speaking an alien language. Because remember, you're talking to a non-expert audience usually. I mean, they're experts in their field, but there may be some overlap with your field, but they are not going to be the experts for your field exactly, right? So try to avoid this kind of scientific jargon. That's not what they are here for, and that's not what the audience is here for. The audience is here to like learn some new stuff about different fields of research and to get an idea of what is going on in research today, right? So they don't want to go into the details. So avoid using scientific jargon like that. You can use it, but use it a little bit, and make sure that when you use it, whatever words or scientific jargon you use, people will straight away understand. It means if I hear that, I have an idea, I have a picture in my head. And if I don't have a picture in my head, you can test this with people who are not from your field. You ask them, hey, if I say this, what do you think? What comes to your mind? And then if nothing comes to their mind, then what you do is you put that word in your slide and then you put a picture there. Then that's okay. So if I'm using that word and the word is in my slide and I have a picture, and I know that my audience can follow me. But if I'm using that word and there's no picture, and my audience are lost, that's all it takes for people to stop paying attention to you. So avoid using scientific jargon. Okay. Okay. Myth number 6: you must use your actual FYP title. So again, not true. So your FYP title is your FYP title is actually designed to contain all the terms that your research is using, right? So it is the title of a storybook that nobody wants to read, not even your supervisor. It's a title that reminds people that, oh, this is work, you know. So don't use that for this 5-minute FYP competition. Use a title that makes your work seem interesting and fun and intriguing. It makes people ask questions. For example, let's just say your work is dealing with artificial intelligence, artificial neural network for facial recognition using machine learning, something. Okay. And let's just say that was your FYP title. So your FYP title, I don't know how this competition works, but in past competitions, usually what will happen is your slide will flash, that'll be your title, and then your slide, and then the announcer will announce, okay, next, welcome to the stage, blah, 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 with their title, blah, 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 right? So if your title is artificial neural networks, facial recognition, okay, people know what your FYP is about now, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're interested, unless maybe they're in that field. But what if your title was artificial intelligence and the age of Ultron? Will AI take us over? Then suddenly people are interested. Oh, age of Ultron, what is this? So you have a duty to make your work interesting. So use every available tool at your disposal to make your work interesting, including rewording your title, if that's an option. It should be, I think. Okay. So myth number 7 is you must use diagrams from your journal proposal thesis in your slide. So some people, what they do is, not some people, a lot of people, what they'll do is in their slides, they will just copy pasta all the diagrams from their journal or from their thesis. Okay. whatever they think helps, explain their work without any further explanation or any further, modification. It's just paste it there. Then there'll be a graph, and then there'll be some picture of some pills and some one plant. There'll be something like that. And then the person looking at the slide will be like, "What is this hot mess?" So don't do that. You must, when you're designing your slides. So I'm not an expert at designing slides. My topic is actually about the speech, but I just touch a little bit. So when you're designing your slides, you should think about it as the cover of a storybook. Same with your title. Now it's a storybook. Okay, this is the cover, and then that's the title. What kind of storybook will somebody be interested in to listen to you read to them for 5 minutes? Think about that. Okay. Okay. So now we have gone through we've gone through the tone. Okay, the tone that you want. So it should be roughly conversational with a little bit of elevator pitching. Okay, but without the salesman attitude and without the journalistic reporter kind of tone. So slightly conversational, but you're trying to pitch an idea to somebody and try to convince them that this is a good idea, and you're trying to get them interested. Okay, and then we know what not to do. Okay, so now let's think about how we're going to craft your message. Okay, so you need to decide based on your thesis what your message is. The first thing I would suggest to you is to be realistic about your expectations. So depending on what your research work is about, you should limit your message and make it short and concise, neat, nice. Okay. So what can you tell your audience that will be meaningful, right? What's interesting about your work? So for example, a lot of people, me myself included, when I first started my PhD, and even during my final year project, I felt like work was incredibly boring. I had trouble being interested in my own work, but there must be some aspect of it that could be interesting to people, right? So you need to think about that. You need to think and you need to consider which part of your work could be interesting. Maybe sometimes the product that you're making is not interesting, but the problem is interesting. So you talk about that. Maybe sometimes the problem is not interesting, but your method for making the product or your solution, the way you arrived at your solution is interesting. So you talk about that. Or maybe sometimes it's not the process, it's the end product and the potential for the future. Maybe that's what's interesting. So you focus on that. So you need to decide what is interesting about your work, right? And you need to use that as the modal to come up with your 5-minute final year project presentation. Another thing that you need to ask is, why should your audience care? Why should your audience care? So this is an interesting question. It's different from what's interesting about it. So sometimes what you're doing could be interesting. For example, you could be fixing an antenna on a satellite in space. Really interesting. But even as interesting as that is, your audience might still struggle to care about that. Okay, so you're fixing an antenna in space. Okay, that's great, good for you. Why are you telling me about this? Why should I care? Right? That could be how your audience might feel, unless you told them, hey, look, this antenna in space, okay, I'm fixing it because those times when you're watching sports live on TV, and then you're streaming, and then suddenly buffering, and you cannot see, and then suddenly when you load again, the goal is scored, or the moment is over, the match is over, the point is scored, it's over already. This antenna that I'm fixing will make sure that buffering doesn't happen, and you will load smoothly. Then people will be like, oh, yes, please fix the antenna. Tell me more. How are you fixing this antenna? How can I help you? Can I sponsor? You need money? What's going on? Why haven't we fixed this antenna sooner? Then suddenly they're interested because it affects them. So you need to explain how your work relates to your audience. Sometimes the path that your work relates to your audience is very far. You don't need to explain the whole path. You just need to explain, okay, look, this work that I'm doing seems very small, right? But this is how it affects the product, or this is how it affects the market. That should be part of your message. That helps make your message um, more amenable to the audience, easier for the audience to swallow, right? Okay. What is the impact on society? Okay, so this impact on society is an interesting thing because you kind of need to be careful with this one. Like I said before, you want to avoid the salesman tone, right? So if your impact on society when you're explaining this, you're like, what I'm doing is going to cure cancer. Then the judges are going to be like, hold on a second, are you sure? Cure cancer? Cancer's been around for a long time. Are you sure? Well, I mean, I find that hard to believe. But there's no conversation, so you won't get a chance to explain yourself or defend your point of view. So try to control how you explain that impact. So for example, maybe what you meant is that, look, there are cancer cells. And these cancer cells, research has shown that these type of uh, cells are good for fighting cancer cells, or these type of hormones or these type of molecules are good for fighting cancer cells. And these type of molecules are produced in the body when you inject these three things. Okay, and these three things right now, research has shown that the way to produce it is very difficult. So what we're doing is we're finding a cheaper way to produce this thing, which helps produce this thing, which helps produce this thing, which helps produce the cells that fight cancer. So we're not curing cancer directly, but we are addressing this for part of the problem. So if you explain it like that, then your audience will be like, oh, okay, that's cool. That's cool. I can see how that would help the fight against cancer. But if you come out and say, oh, I'm curing cancer, what we're doing is curing cancer, then people will be like, yeah, I'm not so sure about that. Right? So it's very important that you be careful about how you phrase your impact on society. Uh, for example, in the problem statement or in you explaining your work or scope of work, it's dangerous to say that. But it's okay for you to say that as a potential significance of study or as a potential outcome of your work. Then you extrapolate from your work. You're like, okay, look, this is what I'm doing, but here is how it could potentially affect the future. So what I'm doing is contributing to the body of knowledge working on this field. And if other people pick up my work and use my findings and develop it further, this is the direction that it could go in. That people are willing to buy. That's okay. So that's what you should strive to do lah. If you want to amp up what you're doing, you amp it up on the back end. You don't amp it up on the front end. You're like, oh, saya janji boleh buat macam ni. I promise we can achieve this. That's not gonna cut it usually, right? Because the judges that you're dealing with usually they are people with PhDs, they are CEOs, they are business people. They are people who deal with stuff like this all the time. They're being pitched ideas and information all the time, and they know how to differentiate between like genuine ideas that are feasible and ideas that are not so feasible. So try to make sure that when you explain the impact of your work, you are careful about the boundaries. Okay. So when you want to make sure that your audience cares about what you're doing, part of what you need to do is you need to explain how your work affects their lives or even your own life. Okay. It could be that you chose to do this project because of how you felt about something. Or maybe you chose to work with something cancer related, for example, because you have a relative who was suffering from cancer, and that was a topic that meant something very significant to you. So that can be incorporated into your message to make you seem honest and genuine. That kind of thing helps build a rapport with your audience and helps make the conversational tone easier to achieve. Okay. Another thing that's interesting, usually when you're trying to craft your message, and this is something that people are usually interested in, is what inspired you to come up with the idea to do this study. Okay. So if the inspiration is your supervisor told you, okay, look, this is the topic, please do this topic, then nothing to talk about there lah. But if you came up with the topic yourself, right, and you approach your supervisor and there was a discussion and you defended your idea and this idea is yours originally, then people would be interested to know how you arrived at this idea. Where did because ideas are amazing things, you know, and it takes a creative person to come up with a fresh, new, novel idea. And the rest of everybody else is always interested in how creative people come up with their inspiration. So if you came up with the idea, yeah, that's something that's fertile ground for a message. You should use that, right? Okay, so now we know what the message is, or how you should craft your message. Next, how do you make sure that your message goes through, right? How do you connect your message to your audience? So to connect your message to your audience, you need to zoom out and look at the big picture. So right now, when you're doing your final year project, maybe you've spent a lot of time reading journals and you understand the specific problem and what's going on inside, and you know the kinetics and the reactions and the equations and the math behind it and so on. But your audience won't be interested in the details. They'll be interested in the big picture. So you need to take a step back. You need to zoom out of your problem statement and see the big picture and connect it with your audience, with your potential audience. Okay. And like I said before, one thing that you can do is extrapolate your research objectives and outcomes. So at the back end, you can pump that up. You can pump up what it is that your research could potentially bring to the table for everybody in the future. But don't pump what the research problem is, and don't pump what the scope of your work or what you are going to do. That part you can't really by much. But you can say that this is contributing to a body of knowledge that could eventually probably maybe solve this problem in the future with help from other researchers. Okay, that's a sentence that people are willing to buy. So one way to do this is to try and go back in time in your mind and remember what you were like at the start of this. At the start of this research, what would you like, right? And remember to put yourself in your audience shoes. So what's your objective here? Okay. So now we have the tone, we have the message, how to craft the message and how to get through. And what's your objective in this competition? Okay. Your objective is to convince a room full of strangers that number one, your FYP is interesting. This is the most important thing. The most important thing. Your FYP is interesting. You need to convince them that they can understand your FYP work, right? And you need to convince them that you are clever and important. Okay. If you can do these three things, you have the recipe to win this competition. So how do you convince people that you're interesting? Well, one thing that you can do is you can ask yourself, what are people interested in right now, and how that can relate to your work. So you guys are young. You guys literally have your hand on the pulse. So why don't you tell me what do you think is interesting now these days? What kind of what's happening in social media, and what's interesting these days for young people? My references all are a bit outdated. Anybody want to chime in? Anybody got any ideas? What's interesting to young people these days? I like to I'm although I'm a lecturer and all that, my thinking when it comes to drafting speeches and all that scripts tends to lean towards cartoons and comics. My inspiration tends to lean towards that because I feel like that's something that a lot of people get, a lot of people connect with. And I think, and I secretly believe that there are a lot of nerds out there like me. So, I'm trying to reach out to my fellow nerds. So for me, if I were to say what's interesting, I'd say Avengers. Yeah, memes. That's I was just about to get there. You beat me to it. Very good. Yeah, memes are great. I would have thought like something like Avengers. I know it's like it happened a long time ago, the last Avengers movie. I mean, they've got some new ones, but things like that are very interesting. I recently, I guess, I don't know. There's been a bit of a lull in the whole movie industry. Maybe Squid Game. So how do you relate your work to something like that, to Squid Game or to Avengers? So I'll give you an example. Say in your work, what you're dealing with, there is a hierarchy of sorts. Okay, maybe there's a hierarchy for how maybe electrons are transferred into orbitals. Okay, when you're describing it to a non-expert audience, in order to make it more fun and interesting, you could say like, okay, so this electron starts off as uh, a circle mass. You know the circle mass characters from Squid Game, but then after you shoot them with X-ray, then they will be promoted to the square mass, and they will skip the triangle mass stage, something like that. So you can use things like this to. Okay, this is not a very good example, lah. I'm just riffing here, so that's not a very good example. But okay, for example, let's say you're talking about say pollution prevention, right? And and you have something that will reduce it by 50%. Then you might consider using something like you might consider using Thanos finger snap. That's one of my favorites. Whenever 50%, the first thing I think of is Thanos finger snap, right? So using popular culture references helps make your work interesting, right? So how to be interesting is actually it's a difficult thing to do, very difficult, because what is interesting to me might not be interesting to you. But when you use popular pop culture references, the word already is popular. So that means it's already the nature of the subject matter is already interesting for a lot of people. So usually you won't go wrong as long as that thing that you're referring to is popular enough. So when I participated in the 3-minute thesis competition, in order to explain water pollution, I kind of used Finding Nemo as my example, and it kind of worked. It kind of worked. It worked lah. I mean, I won, so it worked lah. So if you can think of some way to use, if I want to use pictures from the internet, do I need to include credit source at the bottom of my slide? Technically yes. Technically yes, but I don't know what the rules of this competition is. And usually, if what you're doing is you're using it for like a presentation, like a one-time thing, then nobody's going to hunt you down and ask you. But one thing you can do is you can check. You can when you're looking for the Google images, you can check for the I forgot what it's called. It's the creative license something, SCC something 4. So if it's that, that means it allows you to use that image without having to ask for permission from the author. You have to Google this lah. I forgot exactly the term and the rules surrounding it. But usually for images, there is one creative license that allows you to use it without asking for permission. So you look for pictures like that lah. Let me see, there's another question. Right, okay, no worries. So yeah, pop culture references. Pop culture references are good. Another thing that you can do is you can use one of these 4 elements. You can either use humor, tragedy, gravitas, or shock and awe. Okay, I'll explain on each of these briefly so that you have an idea. Oh, we're running out of time. Okay, so humor is basically when you use when you're funny, basically that's humor. Okay, tragedy is when if the content of your script is basically revolving around something sad, the context is say cancer, then you can use tragedy in your life or tragedy that you experience, or a potential tragedy for somebody else or somebody you knew, to make your audience feel empathy for the problem in your study, right? So that's something that people use quite often, especially if you're in the medical line of research. You can use this tragedy. Gravitas is when it's like tragedy, but it's a bit more about how sobering some numbers can be. For example, if you're talking about, say, the problem statement that you have is to do with pollution prevention. And if you can explain it in a context that staggers people, that makes people step back and, oh, wow, that's crazy. Like if you talk about, for example, okay, as a result of pollution, this many species have been wiped out of the earth permanently. And going into the future, this many more species will be gone. Then that's using gravitas. It's basically the gravity of the situation is such that it cannot be ignored. Then your approaching or your tone and your content will be very serious, and very, you're trying to convince your audience that this is a real problem and that this is a potential solution, right? So you can use gravitas. Then shock and awe can be like gravitas, but you start off somewhere and then you flip it around, right? You start off with this, and then you end with humor, or you end with some light at the end of the tunnel, and that contrast creates the shock and awe effect. So if you don't have any of this, if you cannot think of any of this, I would call it tricks to be interesting. And this is the hard part of a 5-minute final year project, is to be interesting, because that's an important thing that you'll be judged on. Then one thing that you can do is be personal. Tell them something embarrassing about yourself. Maybe when you started this research, you misunderstood something in a term in the research, or you thought that something was, you thought that carbon capture technology was, you have to run around and catch carbon atoms with a butterfly net. It's a really bad analogy, but bear with me. But maybe you misunderstood some of the terms in your research originally. Say that, explain that. That makes you interesting. That makes you personable and likable, and it makes your audience want to continue listening to you, right? So yeah, basically go down to the level of your audience and engage with them there. So okay, that's how to be interesting. So how to make them understand? So you want to basically dumb down your work. Use simple language. Don't go into too much detail. Give them the overview. Use analogies. So my work was dealing with photocatalysis, which is it's a pretty complicated process. You have a semiconductor, light excites electrons. The electrons move up. They react within the medium. They create superanions, and these free radicals attack the organic molecules. See, if I explain it like that, I've lost you, right? So instead, I say that photocatalysis is very similar to photosynthesis. You know how plants use sunlight to break down or to convert carbon dioxide into carbohydrates. Similarly, you can use. Sorry, was there? So similarly, you can use photocatalysis to break down organic molecules in a polluted water sample, for example. So another way to make them understand is to use your slide. So make sure that the complicated parts of your thesis or your work, your final year project, are on the slide, right? So you explain it with a picture so that you save your words and time. You don't have to explain so much. The picture is already doing a lot of the explaining for you. And you want to always try and paint the picture with your words. Don't just state the facts. Okay, my last slide. Okay, you are very clever and important. So you guys are joining this competition that requires quite a lot of guts, and it requires you to know your material quite well. So you are clever and important. So give them a eureka moment. So when I'm sure you guys have heard the story of Eureka, right? When Archimedes discovered the Archimedes principle, what was happening was he was lying down in a bathtub. And as he was lying down in the bathtub, he noticed that the lower he sank in the bathtub, the higher the water level rose. So that's how he discovered the principle of water displacement. And when he figured that out, he had a eureka moment. He was like, oh, holy cow, that's crazy. And he ran out of, the story goes like, he ran out of his bathtub naked in the streets, shouting eureka. So I'm not saying run out of the bathtub naked in the streets, please don't do that. But what you can do is that in your research, when you're doing your final year project, maybe at some point you had a eureka moment. There was something in your research that you didn't understand until you experienced some physical phenomenon that helped you figure out, you suddenly clicked, you're like, oh, that's what it means. So if you remember something like that, put it in your speech. Use that, explain it like that. That will point out to people that you're clever and important. Okay. So I think I'm out of time, or very close to out of time. Okay, we have a question. So I was going to open to questions. So the rest of you, if you have questions, please do. Thank you for your attention, and yeah, you can put your questions in the chat. Let me just answer this question real quick. If let's say my project is about a certain AI application on a specific domain like education, can I focus on the overall idea of AI implementation to various domains? Yeah, I think you can. I mean, because your education is just your specific example, but what you're doing, your work is not really applicable just to education, right? So I think it's fair game for you to talk about applications elsewhere as well, because in the future, that's not just what your AI is, whatever development on AI you're doing is going to be applied to, right? Yeah, I think it's fair game. So yeah, if any of you have questions, you can add it to the chat. Otherwise, I hand it back to the host.
Thank you, Dr. Ashwin. Do we have any questions from the audience? You can unmute yourself and ask. Please do. He's the expert here.
Okay, so we have a question. All right, no questions.
No questions? Oh no.
maybe it's a bit too sudden. It's a bit too sudden. Or what you can do is, if you like, what we can do now in the remaining 4 minutes that we have is you can tell me what your work is about briefly, and I can try and help you think of how to make that interesting.
Okay.
Say you're struggling right now. Say you're struggling right now with your topic, right? Your work, and you don't know, you have no clue how to proceed with this 5-minute FYP. Just tell me your title and briefly what you're doing, and I can give you some maybe hints or ideas of how to make that interesting, if you like. That's also okay.
Oh wow, Zahida, do you want to try? Zahida Raushin? Okay, please unmute yourself.
Hi, hello. My name is
Hi.
Zahida.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Can.
Okay, so my project is about sentiment analysis. Sentiment analysis of user. I'll tell you the long title first. Sentiment analysis of user opinions on MOOCs via Twitter. Meaning I'll be analyzing what users are saying about MOOCs, the online courses, through Twitter. So that's basically it. I'm like analyzing whether the text is considered positive, negative, or neutral.
Okay.
But sentiment analysis can also be used. My project focuses on the MOOCs, the online courses, but sentiment analysis is actually useful for a lot of other things like detecting cyberbully or like racial slurs, stuff like that. So can I like focus on other stuff as well instead of just like the online courses?
Can, but look, if I were you, what I would focus on is on selling the sentiment, because that's literally your work, right? Selling the sentiment of what people feel about online courses. Like right now, you can start by talking about how COVID has forced everybody to go online now, and you can talk about your own personal struggles as a student, right? Studying online. It's a big problem these days, and you can really throw yourself in there, like explain, oh, you guys must be familiar with what it's like to study online. You know, you've got classes from morning all the way to evening, and lecturers giving you recording after recording. Well, guess what? My research is dealing with figuring out how people feel about that. So I am going to tell you how you feel about it. Something like that.
Oh, I see.
And I think what's important about what you're doing, or maybe how you phrase it, the takeaway could be your starting can be your hook, how you reel in your audience can be by connecting with them on this level, you know.
I see.
The problem with online learning, and how difficult it is. If you can phrase that in such a way, explain that in a very graphic and compelling way that your audience like connects, then you've won their attention lah.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much.
About the application, I'm not the expert, you're the expert. So you have to figure out. But it sounds interesting. The sentiment analysis or MOOC. Yeah, it sounds interesting.
Yeah, so basically I'm like analyzing people's feedbacks or like people's thoughts on certain topics.
Yeah. I mean, I'm guessing a lot of the sentiment might be stress, and so you could maybe present present your data lah. But I'd be interested to know what the sentiment was. Yeah, it's interesting stuff.
Okay,
I think you don't have a problem with your subject matter is interesting and easy to relate to. So it's just how you present it, the tone, the content, the approach. Yeah, if you can work on those things, I think you should be fine.
Okay, thank you so much, Doctor.
Okay. Anyone else? Technically, it's 6, but I don't know if the hosts are okay.
Yeah, we are good if you are willing to.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, sure.
Do we have
Anyone
any
else
other takers?
has questions or they?
Okay, me.
Okay, go
All
for
right.
it. Then.
Okay. Hi, Doctor. My name is Rashid. So my project is about application of AI, which is image recognition for managing the recyclable waste. So technically, this topic is about common to everyone about managing recyclable waste. So how could I make them interest in my presentation? When even though this is the common topic, so everyone talk about the recyclable waste management or something like that. So how could I make them interesting? Thank you.
It's not common to me.
Oh, okay.
Okay, but I think I roughly get it. Okay, so your work is dealing with recognizing what kind of, for example, say there are multiple kinds of plastics. So your AI, you are going to do machine learning to figure out what kind of plastic is this and whether this is recyclable or not. Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So it's almost exactly like the example I gave you. If you can tie it into something, some popular media reference, that'd be great. So you have to do some reading and figure out like what kind of popular media. And I don't know the specifics of your work, so I don't know what exactly or how your AI is detecting it, what kind of camera is it using, what kind of software are you feeding it. But I'm guessing something Ultron related. What you're doing is you're like Tony Stark. You're creating a shield around the world kind of thing, except it's to protect the world from unrecyclable waste. It's corny right now. This is off the cuff. I have no, so it'll be a bit corny, but you can use something like that. So I would think that popular media references are good. Off the top of my head, I can think of maybe Captain Planet. You can go for a Captain Planet kind of theme. A bit corny, but here's the thing. Okay, so when you're trying to make your work interesting, okay, you have there's a thin line that you have to walk between making it too comical and funny and keeping it serious. And this is it's a very delicate balance. So Captain Planet seems a bit like trivializing what you're doing. Right? It's too cartoonish, maybe. Ultron might be more suitable, I think. I don't know, because like I said, I don't really know your work. So you've got to find a pop culture reference that really encapsulates your work, that describes it perfectly, really, really hits it on the nail. When you're describing your work, you think of this straight away. Oh, okay, I understand what this guy's doing. So if you can figure out something like that, that'd be great. Recycling.
Right.
Can't really think of anything right now. Recycling. Is it plastics or is it everything? Is it separating paper, plastics, and
Yeah, kind of separating between the plastic, glass, and aluminium. Like
so
that.
it's detecting. Okay.
So basically, we have the separated dustbin, right? So I'm making them technology to use the AI application to recognize those recyclable waste lah. So it makes more interesting, I guess.
So the way my brain works is not the same as the way other people's brain works. So I'm just spitballing here. You decide whether this is a good
Okay.
idea or not.
Okay.
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 Like I said, my brain doesn't work the same as other people. So forgive me if this if this offends some people. You know how gender identity has become a huge thing. Now there are like many different genders, right? So I have an interesting question. How do you decide which bathroom somebody who identifies as a different gender goes into?
By the symbol?
This is exactly the problem that we have with recycling technology these days, because we don't know which thing goes into which recycling bin. Something like that.
Yes,
You
yes.
see where I'm going with this? So you sometimes it doesn't have to be directly related. It can be very obliquely related, but the idea is to get some kind of response. So that's an example of shock and awe. Like you start off with something and then you go completely another way. And the
I
point
was
is just
definitely shocked, Dr.
it's just to
Ashwin.
shock people into oh my god, what is this guy talking about? This is dangerous stuff. And then I said, oh, he's talking about recycling. Okay, I understand. So but again, it's risky because you're talking about something that is risky territory lah. But I believe that in the engineering community, we're all quite level-headed, and as long as we understand that there was no harm, no foul intended to anybody, and people understand the essence of what you're talking about, it's fine. So again, take the risk. I personally believe that judges reward people who take risks, especially when it comes to presentations like this. So it's good, but you got to sell it. You know, if you say and then you are like, oh, not confident, and you're like, you feel it's risky, so you cakap senyap-senyap, tu tak jalan lah macam tu.
Got it. Thank you, Doctor.
Alright.
Okay, Dr. Ashwin, are you okay with another participant?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so Chin, go for it. Chin Kayi.
Thank you, Doctor.
By the way,
Doctor,
can y'all tell me where y'all are from? Sorry, I cannot see. Oh, Chin, okay. Where you from, Chin? Where were
I'm
you from,
from-
Rashid?
I'm from Kajang, Selangor.
Kajang Selangor. I know, but from which institution?
Oh, from UITM, Pasir Gudang.
Okay. Chin, where are you from?
I'm from Quest Ipoh.
Quest Ipoh.
Yeah,
I'm
International University Ipoh.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead, Chin.
Doctor, can I ask, should I change my title a bit or how? Because my title is, for me, for now, it's a bit super long because it's influence of light emitting diode and phytohormone combination in the growth and selected secondary metabolite expression of Ludisia discolor.
Of what? Sorry, I didn't catch the last part.
Metabolite expression of Ludisia discolor. Basically, it's a
I still
plant.
didn't catch that last part.
Basically, it's a type of plant. The name of the plant
okay.
is
Oh, it's the
Ludisia
name of a
discolor.
plant. Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So how do I shorten it?
I have no clue. I don't even know what from your title, I don't know what your work is about. Okay, wait, let me think about it. So I'm guessing that this plant has some useful extracts. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so what you want to do is you want to identify or mark the extracts, right? Is that what you're doing?
Yeah.
Okay, so basically try and make it. This is an example of using too much scientific jargon. So somebody who doesn't know one or two of the words that you just said, they don't know anything about your work.
Mhm.
From the title, you've already lost them. So you try to change it to something like, okay, what is this plant used for?
Basically, it's more for medicinal value.
Okay, what medicine?
For now, as what I have done for my literature review, it's more to, basically they use it more in China, where they use to prevent stroke in a way.
Stroke.
Where they
Okay,
can,
cool.
lower down.
So talk about that.
Okay.
Talk about strokes and miracle drug to prevent strokes. So your title could be your title could contain the word strokes, because that's something that your audience would understand. And then when you're explaining your work, then you explain or you throw in some of these terms, not all, some. Okay, and then the rest of it you need to simplify into language that people who are not from your field and not doing your work would understand. Now, I find it useful as a benchmark. If I want to see whether somebody would understand what I'm talking about, I ask my mom. My mom not an engineer. She's a high school graduate. So if she understands what I'm talking about, then I know that I have simplified it enough. Right? So find somebody in your family who's not, not from engineering background or whatever, and then ask them, hey, do you understand what I'm talking about if I say this? If they understand, then okay lah. Because that's the benchmark, right? Stranger at a bus stop.
Yeah. Okay.
I hope I answered your question.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you, Dr. Ashwin. Do we have any other questions? Let's wrap it up because it is getting late.
Hello. Doctor, is it okay if I were to ask one question about my project?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Who am I talking to?
Shafiq.
Shafiq, where are you from, Shafiq?
I'm from Selangor.
What institution?
Sorry? Oh, institution. I'm from Yaitan Shalam.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Shafiq.
Yeah, okay. Actually, for my project, I'm actually doing an improvement to a current system, which TNB is currently using, which is the name of my project is Pilot Cable Fault Detection. As in, what I'm doing right now is that I'm actually upgrading what TNB is actually right now doing. Like, for example, TNB currently can only, how should I say this? They can only inspect around from 50 to 200 meters worth of cable, underground cable. And so I'm trying to get through it.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So what I'm doing right now is that I'm upgrading it into so that TNB can actually read up to 10 kilometers worth of cables. As in that one whole 10 kilometer worth of cable, you can actually detect whether if there's a mistake or not. I mean, there's a fault. Sorry, fault as in any problems if the power line.
Okay. I understand. It's 10 kilometers deep, is it?
No. It's like 10 kilometers afar.
Long.
Long. Because originally TNB is only using from 50 to 200 meters right now. So what I'm trying to do is like to upgrade it so that it can actually go up to 5 to 10 kilometers. So what I am actually planning for my presentation is that how do you actually like present it if it's a upgraded form of a previous project from a previous project?
I don't understand the question. Sorry.
Sorry, I said, how should I say this? It's like because I'm making a project which actually upgrades a previous project. So how do you actually like present it?
Tak payah cakap lah benda tu.
No
need to mention that you're upgrading a previous project. I mean, basically what you want to do is present the part that you're working on. I mean, okay, so you're upgrading a previous project. It's 5 minute final year project. You don't have the time to go and explain the origins of the project. All this is not so relevant information. Now you explain what is it that you're doing? What is it that your work is bringing to the table? What did you do?
Okay.
So okay, let's just say the problem is the same, for example, as the previous project. You're using the same problem, so you can borrow that. But when you're explaining maybe what's interesting about this is what you had to do. Maybe you had to crawl in the ground and or maybe you had to walk 10 kilometers every day. I don't know, to measure or something like that. So you got to find what's interesting about your work. Is it the process? Is it what you carried out every day that was interesting? Is it the start of it? The problem that's interesting? Or is it the potential solution? Is it, so you got to figure out what's interesting. For your work, it's very, very deep in engineering right now. I've got nothing. I'm drawing blanks.
I'm sorry, because because I'm going with engineering, right? So I was just like wondering because basically just now you actually mentioned that I shouldn't mention it out. I'm actually upgrading a current project, right? So what I can actually do is just point out the general parts, isn't it?
Yeah, no, point out on what you're doing. No need to mention that this, because that doesn't add anything to your presentation. Saying that, I mean, you care about that. Your supervisor might care about that. The people evaluating your proposal for your final year project might care about that. But your audience who's listening to you, they don't care that it's a continuation of a previous project. They want to know what you're doing. So you talk about that. What are you doing?
I see, understood. Okay. So just talk about what I'm doing lah.
Yeah. So focus on what your current work. Like, what did you do? What experimental work did you do? What data did you collect? Then what is your analysis of this data? If you don't have that, then you talk about the problem and the potential contribution that your work has. Without, maybe you don't want to cover in great detail what the work that you did is. You can talk about the problem and your potential contribution. For example, it'd be better if you have some analysis lah. Usually, people want to know that this is your work. So if you have some analysis and all that, that'd be great. But yeah, basically talk about your work. You need to bring up that, there's a continuation. Itu semua belakang cerita. Tak payah.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay.
All the best. All the
you.
best, Shafiq.
Yeah, thank you, doctor.
Yep. Okay, so I think we've gone quite a bit over time, right?
Yeah. Yes, thank you so much for your time, Dr. Ashwin. Really appreciate it, and I'm sure they are really appreciative of your feedback as well. So any last thoughts, Dr. Ashwin, before we close this session?
No, thank you so much for inviting me. It's been fun. And all the best to all the participants for the 5-minute final year project presentation. Good luck. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, and bye-bye, everyone. Take care.